record. Perfect. So as people trickle in, I'd like to welcome everyone. Sarah, MJ, Trish, welcome to The Price is Right. And if Bob was here, he would say, come on down. To get us started, Bob, would you like to start us off with a prayer?
I would indeed. Yeah, let's see. I think I got a block in that. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Well, what a real pleasure to see and hear everyone, and on this gorgeous winter day. So it's just a marvelous time to be alive, the clean of the earth. So tansatayo wasatik, mina nito temtik, mil gisgawa notes. It is a gorgeous day today. Pipon, oh, winter. Kisina notes, it is cold. But for those of you that are going into the other end of the seasons, all of those that were joined by water, the fun part is that in Canada, we can walk on the water now. So it is a delight. So I just give some small direction to the opportunity. I've done all protocols to get ready for this meeting, and started out in the mountains in a clean place on Sunday, and have gotten the fire going today, and ready with all the protocols for all of us to start on a journey together again. So it's really good. So Aotearoa music, I think it is really good. We all come together to talk and to share. And we have good minds and good thinking. So I ask our Creator that we do that, and we have that opportunity to come together as friends and family, joined together by the waters of the lands. And so it's a really opportunity to do that. So my thought for today is may we all walk together, and on this beautiful day, wherever you are, wherever your feet land. So I'm going to ask our Creator that sees all and looks down, and I'll just share this with all. Aotearoa, aink samanto gusan nananas kumtananots. Our Creator of all, the Creator of each and everything. We thank you for the birds that fly on the winds and look down onto the earth to see the two-legged and the four-legged, and say they join together in good minds and good ways of thinking. And we look down on those in the water that swim under, and we thank that for each of those. So this is the opportunity today to do that. Pimokdeo Milson Meskino, may we all walk together in this good road and clear thinking. That's what our humble submission to you today, and to enjoy each and every new friends and relatives that we've come together in a very positive way. So, Aksanma Pina Kaopompton. Thank you. That's all I have to say, and we'll see you again. Aksanma.
Hi. Thank you so much, Bob. Tanya, would you like to offer us a Karaka prayer?
Thank you, Salisha. Nā mihi nui kia koe o tira kia koe anō hoki matua Bob no koe te humore te whai atu ia koe. Thank you for the opportunity to follow in the footsteps of Matua Bob today. It's an honour and a privilege to be able to do so, and to start by offering a karakia in Te Reo Māori. Nā reira me moi tātou, let us pray. Kia tau nā mana ki tanga, ki runga ki tēnā o tātou. May the state of protection settle over us all. Kia toi te kupu, so that our voices remain strong. Kia toi te aroha, so that we remain compassionate towards ourselves and others. Kia toi te mārangatanga, to go forward with enlightenment. Kia tūturua whiti whakamaua ki runga kia tīna. Tīna huie tai ki. Hold fast to your identity. Be firm, join together, bind as one. Mauri ora kia tātou katoa. And best wishes to us all for our session today.
Thank you, Tana. That was so beautiful. I think it's such a incredible privilege to be able to start off our workshops in prayer, in ceremony, and really grounding us to absorb all this wonderful knowledge that we're about to take in. So thank you. So welcome, everyone. I think that Indigenous advisors are in demand. The professional marketplace is growing, growing, growing. But the question is, like, how do we know what we're pricing and if it's in the marketplace as Indigenous professionals? And so that's what we're bringing you all in here today. And we have our marvelous speakers, Tanya and Raylene. So would you like to start us off, Raylene, with your introduction, where you're from, and your role right now as an advisor?
Sure. Tansi Italia ni Tatemtik Raylene Whitford ni Siga so Nehio Squal Nina Apitalakusen. So I just said in my traditional language, which is Cree, hi everybody, my name is Raylene Whitford and I am Cree Métis. I'm a proud member of the Métis Nation of Alberta and was born in Amiskakche, Waskahikan, which is now known as Edmonton. I am a recent Indigenous advisor. Because prior to returning to Canada, I worked internationally for many, many years. However, I am really interested in sharing some of the thoughts and experiences that I've had in determining my own value as an advisor and as an Indigenous advisor. And it's just a pleasure to be sitting beside Tanya and sharing some learnings and some experiences with you all. Hi, hi.
Hi, thank you, Raylene. And I also want to point out that we are very emoji happy and reaction happy. So if you want to put on your hearts and claps on the recordings, that is so okay. And Tanya, would you like to introduce yourself, where your community is from and where your role is as an advisor?
Yes, kia ora, Celicia, and hi anō hoki kia koe, Raylene. Hi to you as well, Raylene. Otira kia tātou katoa to everybody who joins us today. Ko mātātua te waka, ko tūhoi me te whakatōhia nā iwi, ko te pokorihi te hapu, ko rungo popoia marumahue tūranga kukitoi ki te rere roi mata nā marae, ko nui o rako te maunga, waiotahe te awa ko ohiwa, te moana. Anei aho ko Tania te whenua tēnei e mihi kawanua atu kia koutou katoa. My waka, my canoe is Mātātua. My tribal affiliations are Te Tūhoi and Whakatōhia in the Eastern Bay Plenty. My hapu is Upokorihe, and that's inland from Ohiwa Harbour, right across to Opotiki, Waiotahe, along that beach line, the coastline to Opotiki. Inland of that valley, from Ohiwa, follow the Waiotahe River up to Pukenui Mountain, which is where I was raised at the foot of our maunga, in the Urewera, on the eastern cusp where we meet Whakatōhia, where Tūhoi meet Whakatōhia, and around the Waiwaka Valley. So that is me, tūturu, through and through. If you know Waiotahe, if you know Opotiki, then you know me. I'm Tania Te Whenua. My role within INDIGI-X is as the New Zealand lead, which is a great pleasure to be part of this team. I am a lawyer and consultant, and I've been practicing in the space of Indigenous development my whole professional career, but for myself since 2016.
Marvelous. Thank you so much for both of you taking the time from your day to be with us and to share all your wonderful knowledge with us. I guess my next question, I'm wondering, can you share a story with us where you might have felt vulnerable or unsure on how to price your services? Did you ever feel like you were underpaid or underpriced? And what did you do about it? And we're popcorn style, so if either of you have a story to share right away, jump on in.
I'll go first. But first I want to say I'm nervous. Usually I'm the one moderating and interviewing the others. So this is a unique position to be in. But The story that I'm going to share is actually me prior to coming home, because I think it's a good example of just a way that somebody who I really trusted taught me how to kind of determine my actual value as a consultant. So this was in 2015. I had just finished directing a company on the stock exchange and was kind of finding myself with time on my hands and looking at new opportunities. And I set myself a goal of having 101 cappuccinos, just with people who I had never met before, or who knew, who I knew kind of very kind of remotely on LinkedIn or what have you. And I actually got to my 13th cappuccino and I was offered a job to go to Ecuador and to direct a cost optimization project. So I took it, and I was so desperate to, do some work and get a contract. And to be honest, at that point, I was desperate to leave London for a period of time. And so I was going to agree to a very, very, very low hourly rate, just because I felt like that was enough, right? And the kind of turnaround to agree the amount and step on a plane was really short. It was 3 days, which is not a lot of time to do the self-reflection that's needed to be able to truly assign a financial value to my worth as a consultant or as a director of a project. But what one of my friends did is we had breakfast and she sat me down and she basically worked me back from what I would cost as a consultant with KPMG, which is the firm that I had started with and who I had met her through. She basically worked me back from the hourly rate that they would charge, and then just discounted it slightly because I was an independent and there weren't many overheads. And so what we ended up with was at the time, I thought it was a very big number, right? And so I proposed it. And most importantly, I just described how I arrived. I basically justified that number just very factually with data. And they accepted it. There was no negotiation whatsoever. And I ended up keeping that same rate for 3 years, which was a mistake. But that's because I didn't have the confidence or I guess the wherewithal to negotiate it. But really, that was just a massive practical thing that was taught to me that I didn't even acknowledge. And so I would encourage everybody on the call today and watching our recording on YouTube to really, use data and facts, because sometimes I find as Indigenous professionals, Indigenous change makers, Indigenous people, sometimes we have a tendency to undervalue ourselves internally. And that can show up in the contracts that we sign with others to provide them with really useful advice that they need dearly. So that's one of my stories.
Thank you, Raylene. Shall I just follow on from that and say, and I imagine, Celicia, you would also welcome any questions that people would have of Raylene and myself in the chat as we go, but I want to immediately follow on to endorse the advice that you've shared. When I started consulting, I had just left, I was managing the Māori programs at Victoria University, which work with the public sector to help the public sector understand their obligations towards Māori within New Zealand under the Treaty of Waitangi. So I managed those programs. So I understood what the market value was for consultants who we would get on in my role as the program manager at Victoria University, and almost like in a subcontractor role, subcontract them to our clients who were predominantly the public service sector in Wellington. So the first piece of advice is that I really intimately understood the market rates for consultants in the area that I was then moving into. It was almost inadvertent. I wanted to leave that role in. I had opportunities to contract back to Vic University as a consultant then. So the biggest thing was not understanding the market rate. And absolutely, being able to justify the price. So every time we put forward a price, we describe how we arrive at that price, and it makes it much more easier for the client to understand the figures and accept. Also understanding the client should have a very good knowledge of the market rate as well. The thing about discounts, so I think we have a mindset that discounting is going to be attractive, and in many situations, certainly it is. When the client is considering budget, all of those sorts of things. However, the opposite is also true. If we price ourselves at market rate or even above market rate, it also gives an impression to clients. And if we can justify this impression, and I have no doubt that we can through understanding our value, that what we bring adds value. We bring added value in this space as Indigenous people, and we do. So the opposite is true in that often you can portray a higher price can portray quality and added value. And I 100% believe that we can carry that, and we do carry that as Indigenous peoples. So bearing that in mind as well as to how you arrive at your price, whether you're slightly undercutting or you're wanting to go further and justify the added value that you bring. With respect to the question around, this particular question around negotiating through where I felt vulnerable, clients who are almost, I understand the question is challenging our value. This is something that I'm currently working through for a third party, because I'm also a practicing lawyer. And one of the areas that I have expertise in, practice in, or specialize in, is in equity for women, equity for Indigenous peoples within their contracts and contractual terms in their places of work. So I'm currently negotiating on behalf of Indigenous female clients rates which are well below, not well below, but they are below market rate. So in that context, again, the same principles applied. I needed to seek advice from experts about the market rate. So I sourced the market rate for this particular role from various sources. Therefore, I had advice that I could rely on and present an argument on their behalf to demonstrate at least what the market rate was. And I did that. We'll call them the prospective client. So my client then justified why they had fallen below the market rate in the offer that they were offering these Māori women. So, and their position was that they don't have flexibility to move, to lift their offer to at least the market rate. So the story could have ended there, but we decided to take it one step further, and we're now having a fuller meeting with others, not just the prospective employer, but we've pulled in the people that the prospective employer are responsible to. We've pulled in other Indigenous leads in this particular contract because the person that I'm negotiating with one representative from the prospective client, is not Indigenous and is not female. So we're pulling in people who we feel can understand our perspectives and arguments into a broader meeting, and we're also pulling in our advisors. So I think the thing that I would say there, I'm not sure how that meeting will go, but at least we would have followed process and done everything that I feel is tika or appropriate and correct and right to ensure that we've put forward all our best arguments on behalf of the client, and done so with integrity, so that if the prospective client of our client then declines to again shift their position, we feel that we can hold our heads up high. Our client can make a value decision based on that and on their own value, and we have maintained our integrity. we would be able to ask the same of them in the meetings that we're about to hold. Is this particular step one, this offer that you can make with all your integrity intact? And we will ask those questions. I just want to leave this story with this one point. A non-Māori advisor of mine who is a specialist in negotiating contracts for clients and understanding various market rates for various roles, advised me that to be very careful about pushing back against offers, lest the offer be withdrawn. I was quite blown away actually by that advice, because the implication of that advice was it's better to accept less than your value and work for less than your value than risk the offer being withdrawn. And my response to that piece of advice is it's never better to accept an offer and work for less than your value for risk of the offer being withdrawn. So I'll just leave that in terms of vulnerable spaces. It's to walk away from that piece of advice and think that through, it's actually a ridiculous piece of advice and ridiculous scenario to put ourselves in, unless we think it through properly. We're not desperate, and other offers will come along.
And if I might just follow on from Tanya's kind of, I don't know, anecdote. So we're in a very different time to when I left the country. Indigenous people, professionals, consultants, advisors, Indigenous talent is hard to find. And so definitely, I would never advise anybody to discount their rate. I think that companies are not only going to benefit from the advice that you're giving them, they're also benefiting from the headcount and the Indigenous spend, sometimes which there's double reporting, they're double counted. So not only should you be charging what you're worth and accepting a price that reflects the value that you're providing, but you're also ticking other boxes. And I'm not talking about tokenism, but I'm talking about, you know, several companies have publicly committed to Indigenous spend, so you're helping fulfill that. So yeah, right now is a very special time, and I think that we have a duty to ourselves, to our families, to our ancestors, to demand the price that we're worth, and that we need to do the internal work to be able to justify that price to ourselves first, and then move on to help others.
I find that so empowering. And I think that both of you already touched on this a little bit with our next question of like, where do we find that worth? Like as a new entrepreneur or trying to be able to price, even set the baseline of that price. It sounds like both of you have reached out to your community and others that are in similar positions. But how do you settle on that price, and how often do you come back to it? How often do you think, okay, you know what, that was a couple years ago, everyone else's prices are rising, maybe I should too. What does that look like?
So I definitely have my thoughts, but I'm interested in what Tanya's gonna offer first.
And so first of all, understand the market value in all ways that you have access to. So there are different guides that we can access generally, but also, and in my experience, you'll remember I was intimately linked to one of the key providers, so I understood some of the highest rates. But also, I was going to say, reaching out through our networks, because amongst our networks, we may not just have other consultants, we may also have in our networks clients who are engaging consultants and who know what their organizations are paying. And actually my personal friends, those in my intimate network, have been the most helpful for me to understand how market rates are changing and increasing across the board, and so to keep me on my toes in terms of always reviewing my rate accordingly. The only other thing I'd say is not to be scared to, like I think the piece of advice that Raylene just gave, value ourselves to seek the highest rate always, or go higher. All that can happen is it could be negotiated back. But we start in a negotiation, we always start with the higher. Often more, you start with more than what you're willing to accept. And then we negotiate back, and that's a standard principle in all negotiations, especially in, for example, legal negotiations. You ask for more than what you're willing to accept, and if anything, reach for the stars, land on the loftiest mountaintop. You know?
Yeah, I would agree with Tanya. So I find it helpful to, not everybody's going to share the price that they're charging with you, but I have a very close circle of friends that I use to kind of lean on to provide perspective, I guess. I've also found it very helpful to have younger people, like a generation kind of behind me, who are looking up to me to help me or to remind me of the expertise that I have. Because quite often I do get imposter syndrome, and I just think, do I know what I'm doing? Is this, am I just fooling everybody, including myself? So I find, really having a conversation with people who admire you helps. Well, it helps me with the confidence that I need. I also think, older experienced hands are also helpful. Reality, sometimes the pricing is lower than I think it should be, but definitely getting those points of view and just factoring them into, again, what works for you. So the most recent negotiation that I've had is when I joined Deloitte as a partner. And that was, I did really try to find some market perspective of what a partner earns. I was wholly unsuccessful, and the numbers that I got back were just preposterously low. So what I did, one night I woke up from a dream and I just had this number in my head and I wrote it down on a sticky note. And this was months and months and months before I joined the firm. I put it up in my office, which is like a little cement bunker in Vancouver because the apartments are so small. I posted it up in my office, and I don't even think I acknowledged that I looked at it every day. In the end, I was able to justify a number, and the number came out a little bit higher than the number that I wrote on that sticky. There was no negotiation. It makes me wonder, did I underprice myself there? But at the end of the day, it's not a bad place to be. So yeah, I think there's various ways that you can go around determining the number that works. But definitely dedicate time and thought and justify it, because if you can justify it, it's going to be difficult for other people not to.
And if I could jump in there and again can reaffirm Raylene's piece of advice, I was also going to say, once you have your number, write it down. Write it down. That's my number. No, that's my number. I don't go under that number unless you vary your number for different types of clients. So in my business financial model, I have a corporate rate, and many do. We also have a discounted rate for charities, for example, and for our own communities where we're offsetting. Obviously, we're doing the work because we would say in Te Ao Māori, we're on the kaupapa. It's contributing in other ways to ourselves and contributing back in accordance with the principle of reciprocity to our communities. Yeah. So you can also vary your number across the different types of organizations, clients, and communities that you're contributing to. And the other thing I wanted to say was, don't be scared to compare your number to non-like services. So if we stick to like for like, and we keep our number at a rate which is akin to other Indigenous service providers or services, for example, we miss the opportunity of we might miss the opportunity of getting a rate which is akin to non-Indigenous services, and therefore may command a higher rate because of how society inherently undervalues Indigenous services. So if I could give you an example, in one of the portfolios that I was managing previously as the Indigenous manager within a team that managed various portfolios. One was IT, for example, and so on and so forth. We had a range of different services which were provided for this very, very high level organization. The Indigenous portfolio, the programs were contracted out at a lower rate than other non-like services, for example, IT. That was always something I pushed back against. I always felt if IT services were being charged at this, let's say this hourly rate, and they provided X value to clients that we were servicing, then Indigenous services should be like that rate. And I lifted the portfolio accordingly. So it was above the market rate for Indigenous services, but it was not, it was on par with the various services that we were providing clients. Yeah. So
That's
there's another. It's
that is just infuriating.
We have to take time to self-care ourselves through those types of situations, don't we?
My goodness.
As well.
Sorry.
I'm wondering, Tanya, do you have like almost like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, how do you calculate your balance? Because I know, like, I feel like sometimes we're so stretched so thin, and it is hard balancing community expectations and doing the work that you need to do also. So how do you balance that? I guess the word I was looking for is formula. Do you have a formula?
Sorry, I don't have it. I don't operate in a formulaic sense, which isn't that helpful in terms of giving advice. I can't say 80% this, 20% that. But I think my accountant probably could if they looked at my book. So of course I'm tracking income and expenditure in accordance with categories. They're all tagged, and some are tagged to this service I provide, this community service, and others are tagged to this corporate service. Yeah, so for me, I work on a gut instinct. It's terrible. I'm sure nobody would advise you to just go fly by the seat of your pants, but I know, I sort of know month to month, I'm receiving this amount of solid income. All I would say is that I no longer have to track to the letter in detail because of the nature of the income that I'm receiving. I make that work first. It's paid work, it's well paid work. I do it first. And then whatever the time that I have left in my calendar, I devote to, that's pretty much how I do it. I devote to my community services, which is paid at a lesser rate.
I just want to acknowledge, because Tanya, when you and I first connected and started to work together, like you shared a piece of advice with me, which really shaped how I began to view the world. And that was, you can also price according to the market, right? I guess that's how they'd say it in Western business speak, but you can definitely justify a lower price or a price that you're happy to offer, if it's for community or for an initiative that you really believe in, or something that just really excites you and feeds you, right? Like INDIGI-X, for me, that's an initiative that, no matter how tired I am or how frustrated I am with the world, it fills my cup. So I think that there is value in having that kind of balance. And I'd also challenge your comments around just trusting your gut and your intuition, because as Indigenous people, I think that's a trait that we have and that we need to continue to develop because it was lost through colonization. I don't know if Bob has
100%. 100%. Before Bob offers his thoughts, I just want to say that I'm smiling in the background and I'm kind of laughing to myself. Amongst Māoridom, we have this running joke that all of our families, our close family, and then right up to our tribe will want us to do everything for free. And they do, and that's why they love us and we love them. We love that about ourselves, but we need to, so we just manage our way through that. For example, yesterday I had a request from, I know how much voluntary work I've currently got on, and I know I'm at my capacity, so I can no longer say yes to very involved voluntary work. Like voluntary work, yes, sure. But so yesterday I had to navigate my way through that from a family member request for a legal matter. And so in those situations, we become expert as Māori in saying, it's okay, auntie. You can do this, you don't need me there to hold your hand. Here's the form to make your application in the court. I'll even complete it for you. You can go and make your first appearance. It's okay. If you've got any questions, you just ring me. But you get used to managing your community work in terms of delegating, helping other people to navigate their way through it. Yeah. Otherwise, as Māori, and I'm sure it's the same as First Nations, we would be overcome by voluntary work. And I'll just leave with this last anecdote. My uncle, my grandfather was the chair of our iwi entity, our tribal entity. He's passed away, and now his first cousin, my uncle, is. My uncle said to me, when are you joining our board? It's all voluntary. I said, Uncle, I know it takes a lot of heart and soul to work for our people, and I prefer to keep my soul for just a little bit longer. So, don't be shy to help family members to help themselves sometimes.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments that make sense to me. One is there comes an interesting time when you're asked to do something and you're there because you share those Indigenous knowledges and background to make certain decisions. So I was sitting on the board of governors for Athabasca University, and the difference is you don't ask for a fee, but I'm not an elder, but I am a Wabstaguan, white hair, a knowledge keeper. So when they go beyond what is business that you're offering to represent people, our peoples everywhere, and they want more, they want a Indigenous course, they want to be educated, and that's a real difficult line, because as a person that has this knowledge, it's not mine to keep, it's mine to share. And I can't set a price on that. I don't set a price. So just last week I was up at Sunchild Reserve in the mountains, and a beautiful community, and I was teaching their staff a one-day workshop on making arrowheads. And everybody wanted to do that because then they take it back to their youth. Now, the important part is not just making an obsidian arrowhead, the big picture, and that's what it's fun to share. And because so very briefly, they're making an arrowhead and that work, and we did that. Where did the obsidian come from? Well, in our area, the obsidian that's found, that's 10,000 years old, the points, the tools that are made, comes from St. Anthony's, Idaho. It takes me 2 days and a good pickup to get there and back, and 1 day and 2 days back. And so how did people up to 10,000 years ago get there? Did they travel? There was no Airbus, there was no Greyhound, and no good truck. So how did the obsidian come to the community? That's part of the big picture of trade and reciprocity and business in the old days. And it came to serve the people's needs to make the tools to survive. So you make the arrowhead, you make the traditional glue that's made, and then the sinew that you've taken from a backstrap of an animal, and you insert that projectile point at the other end. You add the fletching with the traditional glue and the rawhide, and the secret knot that lets no ends stick out so it works. And then the toolmaker hands it. He said, "Here, grandson, here's the aerial you've made. Now go get us dinner." And I think that's a really important part, that sharing overall ideas and way to look at things better business-wise. So my area of little bit of knowledge I have is pre-contact skills on how to do those things. Well, asking specifically to do that, I can never be, because I've been gifted that knowledge generationally, I can't ask for a fee, so I don't. So I say, well, I can come on this day, and yeah, it'd be great, and I'm happy to do it. Well, how much do you charge? I don't charge. If you care to help me out, they pay room and board and, mileage, that kind of thing. But I can't ask for a fee because that knowledge is not mine. It's from our community, our elders, the elders that have gone on before us that had the knowledge of tool making or part of the community. And so I say, if, I'm happy to do it. And it sometimes there's an honorarium involved, and I've never been shafted in making arrows. How about that? And so in making canoe paddles or some particular skills on the land, sharing that is a gift given to me to give to the youth. And that's a real interesting line. So at the university at Athabasca, they went beyond just having input that maybe I had some insights to, and then they wanted more. And then that's the delineation that I think I have to make. And I can see that Raylene and you run into that, because they want more, not only your academic background and input, but then they want more cultural input. You don't ask, you don't buy that. We have protocols and we have ways to do it. And that's the important part, is we can share that part, that, well, if you'd like to know that's something that's very involved, and there's protocols involved, and I can help you and direct you on that line. But to just open and give you that is not in my understanding the way I was raised, that the knowledge that's been given is to be shared for our young people and that kind of thing. And those that come in the proper way to ask. And most knowledge keepers are happy to give that when done properly. And we have some protocols in Canada, and it's important. So this moon, the winter moon of December, is the moon of the drifting snows. And so I just look out the window and I see that. So that's my input, is that watch when you're asked to be involved, but they go beyond what we can offer. So hearing Raylene and Brianna in their language saying that, and then explaining what they've said to us, and then that's what I often try to do educationally, is say it first in Korean, then in English, so it's understandable. I haven't said anything terrible, and people will understand that. So that's my view, is be careful when you get asked to do something, they go beyond what you're there for. So if you're on their board or you're on their board of governors, your input is important, but beyond normal questions and ask, there are ways to go about it. And I think we have to stand firm on some of those things. That's all I have to say. I hope it's not too much.
Yeah, I think the point that you're making as well, Bob, is just boundaries, right? Which I'm sure Tanya has a lot of experience in setting.
I did want to, when you're done, Raylene, add to what that really important piece of advice that Bob just shared.
Go ahead, yeah.
Which is to be aware of the trends that we are also setting ourselves up for, and the people around us, other Indigenous consultants. Be careful of what we're willing to accept, because it sets a precedent for those people who will come after us, and they are our children, you know, and they are our friends who come alongside us, sisters and brothers. Last night, I was on a call on a Zoom with an agency, one of the most well-funded Crown agencies in our in New Zealand, and we were talking about what we would do as Indigenous partners on this really important global piece of work. We put forward what we would love to see happen, how we could contribute, and the agent representatives came back, that all sounds good, but we don't have any money to pay you. We don't have any money to pay you. And my friends alongside me, okay, that's fine. The work is really important and we'd like to get it done anyway. It's not fine. So be careful about the max. What is your maxim? Is your maxim that as Indigenous peoples, we will contribute our important knowledge and lower our boundaries, knowing that there is money to pay us? This is one of the most well-funded agencies in New Zealand, and we will do it for free. I can consistently have to push back against not only the expectations of third-party clients who are non-Indigenous, but other Indigenous people's maxims, because they're setting all of us up to fail, not just themselves. So if you could, what is your maxim? Will you work for free? Understand that if that's the precedent that you're setting it for your children as well, and those of your friends who come alongside you. That's not my maxim. It is for my people. It's not for well-funded clients. And secondly, remember the impacts that you're having, what your maxims have on on other people, in the culture that you're setting, the expectations that you're setting of other people on your people. Yeah, I want to encourage everybody to push back against unhelpful maxims, because just to end that, what we know in New Zealand is that we've got this big thing, the pay gap, that is a huge thing for women right now. But for the focus on women invisibilizes, it hides the compounding challenges that we face as Indigenous people, and completely disregards them, and also as Indigenous women. So the real gap between what people are prepared to pay and what we are receiving as Indigenous peoples and as women, it goes like this. It goes non-Indigenous, in New Zealand it goes New Zealand European men, followed by New Zealand European women, followed by Indigenous men, and then followed by Indigenous women, such that the gap between what we receive as Indigenous women and compared to non-Indigenous women and New Zealand European men, so the gap is the pay gap, the gender pay gap for Indigenous women and non-Indigenous women is twice, it's double. So it's closer to 30%, whereas for New Zealand European women, it's close to 15%. It's unacceptable. But you need to know that in order to be able to stand solid and keep pushing back. Why is there that pay gap? Because many of us will work for less than our value. It's affecting across the board averages. And many of us will also work for free. We will accept the roles that we're put in. We won't ask for promotions. We won't ask for more. And that has to change, because for that very reason, you're setting us all up to fail. Not you, particularly on this call.
Can I? You just reminded me, Tanya. So just like I had just come home and I was interviewing for like a very senior executive role for an organization. And I didn't really want the job, but I just went through the process anyways, right? So I was keen to meet everybody and what have you. And it came to a conversation around pay, right? And so they try to put it on you. They're like, okay, well, what are you expecting? What's your expectation? And I said with a straight face, I expect to be paid the same or more than a non-Indigenous man would be paid in this role. And I said this, like, it sounds preposterous, but I said this in a boardroom full of men, both Indigenous and non, and their jaws hit the floor. It was hilarious. I did not get the offer. which is a good thing. I wasn't looking for it, but yeah, we need to challenge these gender kind of biases and just this expectation, this devaluation of ourselves. And I think, like, I know we need to move to questions, and we are going to need to end before the top of the hour, but I also just want to share some thoughts around expectations, because in order to manage, well, at least from my perspective, if I am to successfully manage the expectations that I have for myself, I need to temper the expectations that I think others have for me. And I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today. We're in a very unique time where people from my father's generation, the indigeneity, the cultural aspect, the lived experience was something that was it held a lot of shame. It was pushed down. It was not celebrated at all. It was hidden. It was lost. Now we're in a time, and this has happened, in the last, I think, 15 years, really, there's been a movement to take something that we have held as shameful and elevate it to what corporations, governments are looking for. And, we're left to have to try to maneuver this situation ourselves. We don't have the tools. We don't have the experience. We've never done this before. So I would say, at least in my experience, managing my understanding of the other's expectation and how I'm meant to show up as an Indigenous person, whether it's physically, whether it's, emotionally, that's really helped me create those boundaries that Bob was talking about, because we are under intense pressure and no amount of financial remuneration will ever balance the pressure that we're under and the space that we're working
in. I do believe there's one other factor that you might have missed is that you're coming, whether they're asking you or you're applying, is age, because experience. I'm 81 years old. I know more than I did 20 years ago. And I think that very thing, and you are all young and charming, but as age comes, and that's a real, what experience do you bring to it? And I think not only do you bring an Indigenous background and knowledge, but you bring experiential things. And I think that's delightful, and don't ever discount that, because you have earned those white hairs, you've earned those gray hairs that of seeking knowledge and absorbing knowledge and being able to, that's what they want from you is what you bring. And we often we think, oh, I'm too young, I don't have that experience. Well, that's not so. Or I'm too old, I don't have that experience. So that's just one other factor that I think many of our young professionals can bring to it, that the opportunity of being a professional is really, really important to add in the time you've served.
So if
Thank you, Bob.
Oh,
sorry, Raylene. I'm being very mindful of the time right now, and I know you have to jump into another call as well.
I feel like I don't know the feeling of everybody else on the line, but I feel like we have just started to pick the surface of this. So if it would be helpful to others to have another session, say in the new year, to just continue this conversation, because it's not something that we can just, okay, here's a price, here's the matrix, right? If that would be helpful, please reach out to Celicia, myself, Tanya, and we can make that happen, because I want to encourage a dialogue and just a level of comfort within our network of Indigenous people to really discuss this and question ourselves and each other. So
I think we have some amazing questions in the chat too, and I know I'm being mindful of the time, so maybe even if we can connect with these questions, I'll copy and paste these questions, and then we can bring it to almost a live chat where we can talk about it when we have time and toss some ideas around that way.
Amazing.
Yeah. Also, I'm happy just to, I know that Raylene has another commitment, but I'm happy to offer my thoughts verbally now on some of these questions. I don't have to jump off straight away.
If it's okay.
Let's
with
do
everybody.
sorry, do you guys want to do popcorn style? So Trish, I know that you're first in line, so if you want to unmute and ask, you're more than welcome to.
She can't.
Oh, okay.
Is that the question? What is the role of pre-meetings to set boundaries and guidelines?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure what is it meant by pre-meetings in this context, but we would have a series of meetings in negotiating any particular contract. So I see the whole series of meetings as the negotiation, getting from the outset a commitment that as a piece of advice, good piece of advice, we always seek that they make the first offer. We never come in with the first offer because that gives them an indication of what we might be willing, what we might be willing to settle for. We always ask them to make the first offer. Sometimes they push back and say, we're happy to, if you could give us an indication, and you just push back again and say, it will depend. There's a lot of factors. It depends on a number of factors for me. So perhaps if you give me an indication of what your number is, always we seek for them to make the first offer as the first piece of advice. And then from there, we have these series of negotiation meetings. If you have your maxims written down firmly in your mind before you go into those meetings, that you're already setting the boundaries. And they understand clearly what the guidelines for themselves are and engaging with you by the way that those boundaries and your expectations and the way that you're holding yourself. We call it mana and your integrity. And it doesn't matter if they don't accept, because I can walk out of any meeting knowing that I've maintained my integrity and can hold my head up, and I've acted with mana throughout those meetings. They don't often not accept, because even in they often, I can't remember a time that my negotiations weren't successful. I'm not blowing my own trumpet here, but I don't know, because, and also in having your boundaries set for yourself from the outset, they can see you're the real deal. They're buying into the value that you'll bring to the organization and your whole Indigenous self. And so you're coming, even from the outset, showing them you are the real deal. That's what I would say to Trish. What do you think, Eileen?
Yeah, and Trish, I'll just add a closing thought before I jump off. The pre-meetings, like my view is pre-meetings are the same as doing actual work, and there needs to come a stop to those. Like there's an amount of upfront plan management and things, but I often find some organizations, they want to just extract your knowledge. And so they ask for meeting after meeting, and when they start to ask you to prepare things, like that's where I draw the line, because those can easily be taken and repurposed or what have you, right? So just be careful, trust your gut, and again, go back to those boundaries that you've defined for yourselves. I've got to go. I've got to go to another meeting, as is all of our lives today. I'm going to wear this blazer, which I am wearing in memory of watching Price is Right with my grandma and Roddy. But it's such a pleasure to see you all, and there's so many familiar faces on the line. I would really like to have another one of these kind of roundtables, just to informally chat about your questions, etc. Maybe we don't record it, just to have a safe space for everybody to ask. But thank you so much, Nananas Kumten, for being a part of the program. I'm going to drop off now. Thank you, Salisha, for moderating, Tanya for participating, and Bob holding a good space. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Namaskar.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Salisha, can you give us how to get on the Jeopardy? Shoot me a little thing to do it. And see, I said the age is one thing, but then you run into other things. You're not as tech savvy. So if you could shoot me something to get on the Jeopardy part, I'd like to do that. Thank you. And thank you for great inputs from good questions and good presentations from our famous ladies. So it's an honor to sit in the same room with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Katamihin, kakio, all of you. I give deep thanks.
To you too. Celicia, if is Angela still online?
I
Yes.
believe so. Yeah.
Great. I'm just reading your question, Angela, which is about work experience required. And in lieu of being able to describe your community work experience as valid work experience, I'm not sure how that works in Canada, but the other thing I would say is not to fear getting on the ladder. So I know working toward, we call them pathways for progression toward that ultimate goal might be, sometimes it might seem too far out of reach. I've got to do all of these years, but you would be amazed, I think, at how getting on the ladder can contribute to building what is required. We get there. It's so easy to feel disheartened by maybe not being accepted to one or two roles for lack of that experience required. And we might think, oh, I've got to do 25 years. But if we get on the ladder and we get a really good piece of experience under our belt, that might be enough to justify the next big role that comes along. Do you know what I mean? And all of a sudden, it's only taken you 2 years because you were willing to get on the ladder. Back yourself and not be overwhelmed by this feeling of.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, it's been an interesting time because especially I find compared to men, like I'm so easily, I'll read a job description and be like, oh, like can't apply to that. But the men in my life will just be like, what? Like just apply anyways. Yeah. And that's not something I think I like is my default yet. And I think I need to get better at that because it's so interesting. Like
completely.
In Indigenous organizations, like they value that, like you bring fresh ideas like as a young person, right? Compared to somebody who might be 20 years in, but doesn't really care anymore, for example, you know, like things like that. And it's hard to, I think we need to, I mean, you guys spoke about it earlier, is like internalizing like your worth and like really owning that. No, this has been golden. I'm so thankful for this session. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Angela. Awesome. And also you remind me of another piece of advice, which is be willing to be turned away also. Be willing to put ourselves out there and have 10 no's before we get a yes. You know, perhaps because of the reasons that you have highlighted. We might not have the necessary, exact necessary experience they're looking for, but we have the necessary experience that somebody is looking for.
That reminds me of the message that you shared earlier, Tanya, of shooting for the moon and landing among, exactly where you wanted to be. And I think that's so beautiful and so motivational. Thank you for your wise words. And I look up to you so much. So have so much beautiful things to share with us all.
Oh, Celicia, thank you. The pleasure, true pleasure and an honor.
Do we have any last questions before we wrap up? I think that might be it, but I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
I can't hear you. I think she's good to go.
Perfect. I love Raylene's idea about bringing this up again in the new year, because I do agree there's so much to talk about in such little time. But I think just having the transparency and the ongoing conversation and leaning on each other as the INDIGI-X network about pricing and marketing strategies and understanding the market. I think it's such a beautiful concept and needed one. So I want to thank you all so much for coming to this workshop, and I'm looking forward to hosting it again in the new year. So thank you. And thank you, Bob, for your beautiful words again.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Bob.